Okay, so we have 55 people. I suspect some will join us a little bit later, but let's maybe make a start. So welcome everybody. My name is Raylene Whitford, and I am the director of INDIGI-X. First, I'd like to start out with a land acknowledgement. So today I'm joining you as a guest on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples and the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, which is now more commonly known as Vancouver. The land I'm joining you from is full of good medicine, from the cedar trees and the eagles that nest in them to the various meeting places where Indigenous people from around the world gather today. Even though my family is not from these lands, I personally have been long drawn to the healing aspects of Turtle Island's west coast. Perhaps what is most important to acknowledge in the context of our meeting today is the body of water that touches the land that I am a guest on. This water, the Pacific Ocean, is but another common thread that connects Indigenous people on Turtle Island to our Maori sisters and brothers down south. This body of water, which we all share, continues to serve as a conduit for physical and spiritual nourishment, as well as an ancient highway that enabled international trade long before the countries of Canada and New Zealand were declared. And so in full acknowledgement and gratitude to you all on the lands that you're joining us from today, it is a true pleasure to have you join us for the final presentations of our third virtual exchange cohort today. Hi. So here's the agenda that we have planned to today. We're going to begin, as we always do, in a good way with some ceremony. We'll invite Bob Silverthorne and Aotearoa to say some good words. I'll give a little bit of introduction of the program. I see a lot of familiar faces, some not so familiar, so we'll kind of try to keep it brief. Unfortunately, Minister Makuta is not able to join us today. She's touring Fiji, where we had our last exchange. And yeah, she sends her regards, but I can see quite a few people from the various ministries in Canada and New Zealand. So I fully trust that you'll take our messages back to the ministers and help us kind of disseminate the knowledge that we have here today. The majority of today is going to be spent in presentations. So we have 4 amazing groups looking at 4 completely different topics. So that's where we'll spend the majority of our time. I'll have a little bit of housekeeping, house rules before we start the presentations so we can just make sure they flow freely. Then we'll finish with some final remarks and a closing prayer. So moving along, it is a pleasure to introduce Bob Silverthorne to you all. Bob has been a long-time supporter of myself and a cultural advisor for INDIGI-X since it was founded in 2020. Bob is a knowledge keeper in Musqueam, which is in Treaty 6 territory, which is now commonly known as Alberta. He's one of the founders of Musqueam College and the former director of High Country Guides and Packers School, which was one of the first guiding schools to teach people to be guides and packers in the mountains with horses and mules. Through his training program, he helped place graduates in backcountry roles across the country and ran up to 60 head of animals. He's also a knowledge keeper and a teacher of Indigenous pre-contact skills such as tool making and cooking. And 51 years ago, he was the principal of the second Native controlled school in the US, Rocky Boy. So with that, Bob, it is such a pleasure to invite you to help us open in a good way.
Well, it's just such an honor to join a prestigious group here, and thank you very much for the opportunity. The quality of this group is marvelous to do. So I'd like to share both, and my traditional teaching style is both in Korean English, and so you'll understand my thought process that I'm sharing with us. And I've done the protocols today, starting early and bringing us all together. So tansataya nito temtik mina kakio meosin. May all of us come together. Tatamihin kakio pitoktan mina kapik squata notes. Meals and months and we come together thinking in a good way. We've come together with new eyes, with fresh eyes. We come together and we're unknown to each other. And now, as in Cree, we could call Meoakuto, and we are now family because we share those thoughts and knowledge. We're two bodies of land that are joined by the water of the land and all the hosts that come from it. So it's really important that we start off these good ways. This is a special time of year here in the Sundance culture area of the plains and across Canada, as this is the month. We're at that time, Aikpisim, when the frogs return to sing, and they give us the knowledge that the land will be able to reproduce. And as the snow eater winds take that away, we put away our winter stories and we come to share with our young people in new ways. And this group, INDIGIGEX, is certainly that. It's that Magiwe Pipon Semak. So the winter is going, and like the white hair of the old people, and it protects the land. And as it leaves, it gives the promise of spring and new life. Some people maybe look at it differently, but I think all of us as people of the land, we look at it that this is the gorgeous beginning of the cycle of the year. So we give special thanks to all our leaders and each of you as leaders. And we're joined by this land, and we thank you for that. And, let's see, I just wanted to give some direction that is a thankfulness that we all come together. We all come together and talk together and share. We have a good way of thinking, and we plan. What we start today is our first step for assistance and help of our young people wherever they might be on these lands. So it's a marvelous time to do that. Just wonderful. So we start that journey together today. We have walked that good road, and we've done it together. And so what we've seen with fresh eyes here and knowledge, we pass on to the generations, and that's a really important part. So I've given thanks to the land. We give special thanks for this day of the land. Of the land on both sides of the water, the land of the two-legged and the four-legged, the land of those that fly in the sky and those that walk or swim under the water. So we give thanks for all of that. So in my prayers, I'm going to ask Sagit that we share this love together because we have a common goal and a common direction. And that's such a marvelous thing to have. So if you'll just give me a moment, and I'd like to share these words with you. Aotearoa and Turtle Island, nananaskum notes. 88 one music, tatamihin, kakio, kipikswatamina, a pimokte, a milson meskano, milson montenachkan. Thank you for giving us this good life as we come together, we think together, and we walk this journey on this good road. Exanma, mina, kaupomten. Thank you so much.
Nananaskumten, Bob. Your guidance is very, very much appreciated. Next, I'd like to invite Aotearoa Kipa to offer a Karakia. Aotearoa is an alumni of our inaugural virtual exchange and a member of our advisory committee. As director of Hekina Consultancy, Aotearoa is an advocate and facilitator of Maori inclusion and has forged a reputation as a trusted advisor for government agencies and private organizations. His primary focus now is supporting the implementation of a Mataranga Maori program into a government agency and is closely working alongside New Zealand's leading environmental and engineering consultancies in the work of climate change. Welcome, Aotearoa. Aotearoa.
Tēnā tātou. Aroha mai, I think I just had some internet technical issues here. Koe tēnei, ko Ngāti Rārua, ko Ngāti Maniapoto, ko Te Aroanga Iwi, ko Iruira ke Patoko Ingoa. Kei kone ki te whakakī pia i ngā hu, i te aputai wahotia e tō tātou rangatira i tō tātou hui.
Oh no, it looks like we lost him. Tanya, could we lean on you to finish his kind words? I think it's important that we.
Sorry, Raylene, I'm just wondering, Tanya, do you want me to jump in?
Sure.
Well, go to look, and look, a poor substitute for but I mō rena koutou he mehinuri atu nei I tēnei wā ki te tautoko ngā kaupapa I tēnei rōpū, ki te tautoko ngā kaupapa o INDIGI-X. I had mātua Bob, tēnei nakwe I tēnei mihi I tēnei Karakia tēnei I tēnei wā. Bob, I'm always touched by your graciousness and your words and that re-emphasizing of the things that connect us to the land and also connect us across the Pacific as well too. And I just love that approach that that in your part of the world, the frogs are now coming out to remind us that I guess you must be bouncing into spring because we're just bouncing into autumn or fall here. And for those of us who do have snow-coloured hair, I quite like that line of yours as well too. But look, all I'm going to do is just really quickly step in. Ko Eugene Berryman Camper ho he uri o te aroa me mā tātua waka. My name's Eugene. Again, I'm a alumni of the first INDIGI-X group. I'm also on the New Zealand Advisory Committee. And my tribal links are up here in the Bay of Plenty of Aotearoa, but really just want to tautoko to support the words that Bob has outlined, and I guess from the Aotearoa perspective, just to raise a karakia as well. One of the things that I would like to do though is just as part of this rōpū, we acknowledge the sad passing of Moana Jackson yesterday. Moana was such a gracious, intellectual activist in terms of te tiriti or Waitangi, in terms of the treaty and in terms of its place, and in terms of our role in terms of nationhood building within Aotearoa. So we acknowledge his sad passing. Of course, we had Widow pass away last week as well too. So we think about those who have moved on at this time. The karakia that I'm going to use is one that, well, actually, I will take Bob's approach. I'll just open us up with that and then translate. So he karakia te mimatanga. Ha ki roto, ha ki waho. Ki tau te mauri e kōkiri nei e ngā piki me ngā heke, ko te ranga Māori e taku I rapu nei, ti hei mauri ora. Breathe in, breathe out. Settle the mauri that stirs within me through the ups and downs. It is peace that I seek. I've been using that with a number of groups that I'm affiliated to right now. Obviously, we know that the world is going through global turmoil right now, and we think about what's happening in the Ukraine, but also, of course, both of our countries are still continuing to deal with the pandemic, and there's a lot of people that are going through ups and downs right now. So hence the reason for that karakia. Once again, just want to step in as a pause substitute for Eduardo, but wish you all the very best Bob, always a pleasure. Raylene, I'll hand back to you now. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Jean. Yeah, I am so grateful to have you as an advisor, one of the 6 members of our advisory committee, and just a light for INDIGI-X. So I'm going to start off with a quick welcome and a brief introduction about what INDIGI-X is. For those who are new to our group, I think you've already witnessed it. So INDIGI-X is full of heart and love and connection and relation. It's about building relationships and good relations with our Indigenous cousins across the world. So INDIGI-X was launched in 2020. The original intention was to facilitate in-person exchanges, which is still a priority and may be possible in the near future. But for now, it serves as a platform for Indigenous professionals to connect and to learn from each other. We provide various resources to support our delegates in their professional journeys through networking, through the virtual exchanges, opportunities for professional development, and a platform to increase their visibility. We do quite a bit of policy advisory for government, but I think what is most important for me, at least, is that INDIGI-X is a place that you can make lifelong friends on the other side of the world, who you may hopefully have the opportunity to meet in person at some point, but there really is a sense of solidarity in this program and in the alumni that we now have. Just a few points to note. So we are hoping to have a trilateral exchange with Australia in September, October time. So there is one more virtual exchange kind of in our future. And in between that, we have a plan of workshops, virtual coffees, just virtual and in-person groups to meet each other and build relationships and friendships with one another. So I feel like this slide is a bit redundant because I think we're all well aware of house rules when it comes to Zoom. When the program first started, I made this slide because we were all very new to video conferencing. But anyways, if I can encourage everybody, stay on mute unless you're presenting. There will be opportunities to ask questions after each of the presentations. Keep filling up the group chat with your questions, comments, etc. And above all, let's just engage with respect for each other. So now all of the housekeeping out of the way, let's get to the meat and potatoes of the presentation. So I would like to welcome Group 1. Their title of their presentation is Self-Governance Through Making Relatives. I'll let the group introduce themselves and I'll let them share their screen. But yeah, welcome Group 1.
Atamari e whānau. Nothing like being the icebreaker of the morning or afternoon, wherever you sit. Ko Lisa Warbrika hau, uri no Te Ati Haunui a Paparangi, no Ngāti Awa, no Ngāti Rangati'i. No mai hara mai. I have the enviable task of introducing this amazing cohort in our kaupapa. Before I do, I'd just like to invite Mato John to offer a greeting. Kia ora, John.
I will bring a greeting from our Nakota people, the plains and in the mountains of North America. The Gunchawa Mentauncha Stubby, Ishnish Yahibini, Oda Niwahich to Hoa Stay. My friends, my relatives, my kinspeople, it's wonderful to see you and blessings out to all of you. We have much to share. Thank you.
Kia ora, John. And just briefly, Ngārangi.
Kia ora tātou. Tautoko hia ngā kōrero kei tō te ārai, pērā ki ngā mihi ki a tākuta Moana Jackson. Ko hinga te tōtara o te wānui a tāne, I wanganui a mātou te ao Māori, e tātou katoa o te ao. Pohiritia ngā tangi ohene nui te pō ki aia na reira haere whakangaro atu. Pohara tia e mātou ngā iwi take o te ao, e te wehe ngā tākuta Moana Jackson. Nā reira, au kua kata mai ana te pō, mahi a te mahi koutou, hei hiki ngā kaupapa, hei hiki ngā whakaro ngā kōrero a tākuta Moana Jackson. Nā reira, i rungi tēnā, moi mai rā. Just very quickly wanted to acknowledge very kind words that were shared by Eugene to a pillar of Māoridom, of Māori self-determination, tino rangatiratanga, Dr. Moana Jackson, whose passing is being felt right throughout the country and indeed the world. So a very short acknowledgement to our rangatira, to our leader and our pillar of everything that is good about Māoridom. Tēnā koutou, I'll pass it on to the starting of our presentation. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Self-governance through making relatives. I would like to introduce our team, if you would, the bio page. Thanks, Sarah. I guess what I'd like to anchor at this point of the kōrero, with the cohort I've had the pleasure of getting to know and learned so much in terms of our exchange and understanding that which I did not prior to having conversations with our Canadian whānau. It's been incredible. And whilst we all sit in a diverse range of professional positions, including leadership, IT, communication, agribusiness, science, research, finance, policy, at the heart that connected us was our absolute knowing the relevance of tikanga and our customs, and that the commitment that we know what we need to do and how we need to do it. Without belabouring our John's kōrero next, self-governance is what brought us together, our understanding of what we know needs to happen in our respective fields, that provided that rāranga, that weaving of the kōrero so seamlessly over the last couple of weeks. So mihi atu to my cohorts. I would like to now pass to John, who will proceed with our kōrero. Kia ora.
Thank you, Ishnish. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Welcome and listen. Open your hearts, your eyes, your minds, and your ears. We come together and bring greetings to and from Ina Makoche, Mother Earth, and INDIGI-X, Father God, and Miniwaka, Holy Sacred Waters. We look to our relations of land, water, animals, fish, plants, trees, mountains, and oceans. We speak the language of land and water. We remember and we sing the songs of our ancestors. We have relations across the continents and across the great waters. We must be mindful of not just considering humankind, but recognizing our relationship to all of creation. We remember our relatives and how we made treaties from time immemorial. We have a relationship with Creator. For this, we give thanks eternally. Our people have signed and made treaty through the Wampum Belt, the Jay Treaty, the Buffalo Treaty, and many others. We create relationships guided by Creator. We relate to all of creation. We have vision and prophecy that has foretold we will provide ways of living with a holistic understanding of our planet. Our songs and our prayers are our survival. We invite you into becoming relatives, speaking and singing our reality with all of creation. Ishnish, thank you. I turn it to the next speaker.
Kia ora no koutou. I believe that's me. Hard to follow that, to be totally honest with you, but I'll do my able best. Here you'll see our recommendations, and these recommendations are a summary of many weeks of deep discussion and wānanga. A bit of context around the first recommendation, which I'll speak to. A fundamental principle to our Indigenous peoples of Aotearoa, New Zealand and Canada and world over is to be able to determine how we live on our own terms in this ever-changing world. And being bound by similar histories of colonization, loss of land, culture and language brings this need into more sociable focus. So it is through our culture's shared expression of tikanga, literally what is right, and our shared epistemologies of collectivism, in the Canadian context, the tale of the Wendigo and our making relative ceremony. This is what guides our reclaiming of self-determination. So it is the group's recommendation that all treaty settlements, negotiations, reconciliation processes begin with traditional ceremony and on the land of the peoples before any legal proceedings. And in the spirit of acknowledging Dr. Moana Jackson, there seems no more appropriate place to begin than this first recommendation, which really stems from some of our more recent experiences we have been a part of, from treaty negotiations to reconciliation processes for some of us. There was a consistent comment in our group that these Crown negotiations have put us way too quickly against each other as Crown agent and Indigenous, which is not the Indigenous way. Our way is to make relatives through ceremony from the outset. Hence, our recommendation to both Canadian and New Zealand governments to begin these processes with traditional ceremony and custom prior to any negotiation or legal footing. And it has been our experience that our traditional ceremony has not been participated in the right spirit or has been done at the very end of the process. We believe opening with ceremony will instill a truer sense of reconciliation and meet a more natural sense of self-determination. Recommendation number 1, I'll pass it over to Kyle. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora everyone, koe kakina. Over to recommendation number 2, which is to empower traditional forms of Indigenous nation citizenships within Canada. A quote referred back on by an elder from my home community of Kiragon-Zibi is, "People within collective kinship is core to the spirit of a living nation." So currently the paternalism and interjection of federal government policy has imposed a system of generational cutoff, blood quantum, and lineal ascents that's in its genesis is based upon imposed Eurocentric ideologies of race. That paternalism over nations' ability to self-determine one's own citizenship greatly affects nations' ability to build towards their unique and fluid and evolving needs as a group or a collective, in direct conflict to, as we know, articles within the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Traditional forms of citizenship refers to how traditionally Indigenous nations built kinship and maintained family and community and collectivity based on the specificity of their culture and epistemology. So recognizing that each nation has unique cultural epistemology and pedagogy that needs to be built within the structure of recognized citizenship and inclusion. So moving beyond the INDIGI-X and government paternalism, genealogy, blood quantum, and into a self-governance determination framework that is based on an inclusion, traditional collectivity, and the responsibility to build healthy nations. So a responsibility over rights perspective, that there is a collective responsibility to prevent further loss or cultural erosion and work towards revitalization, and that individual rights are not paramount to collective responsibility. And then this leads over to our third recommendation. I'll hand it over to Amanda.
Thank you, Kyle. Good day, everyone. Calling in from Treaty 7 territory near Calgary. I humbly wanted to bring my perspective today as a mixed individual with both Cree and settler roots. Today, I want to talk to you about our group's recommendation to formally recognize traditional leadership structures. Our group has spoken at length about this over the past few months as we've spent time making relations with each other. We've discussed our respective experiences with traditional governance within Indigenous communities, and we recommend that these systems be formally recognized. Supporting communities to determine their approaches and uphold their rich histories instead of being burdened with a non-Indigenous governance structure through imposed chief and council system in Canada is our recommendation. Through teachings from many elders, I've learned that First Nation community governance is not hierarchical and that an imposed governance system has led to systemic racism. It's also contributed to significant income disparity within communities, supporting lateral violence, as opposed to making relatives, even within some of our own communities. It's impossible for the federal government to create nation-to-nation relationships when leadership in many communities changes so frequently, which is out of alignment with our recommendation to make relatives through communities' unique customs. And this is not for a lack of trying on behalf of the leaders who are trying to navigate the imposed system, including some of the folks on the call who have served their communities through leadership positions. Navigating a system that does not reflect our needs and aspirations and that has not kept pace with principles of modern and accountable governments continues to impede our progress as Indigenous peoples, as we remain accountable to the federal government and not the people in our communities. Additionally, there are considerations to be made at a federal government level when engaging with Indigenous peoples. We would like to encourage our respective governments to move away from personalities being the representatives. The popularity of a few Indigenous peoples who are overburdened with decision-making and sharing perspectives through things like advisory councils is a practice that requires refinement. We recommend self-governance as a viable option for Indigenous communities, and our colleague Sarah is going to talk more about how we see exploring these issues.
Kansai, Sarah Jackknife, Spigasun, Elizabeth Métis Settlement Oche. I'm joining you today though from Tamaki Makaurau. This group recommends that the governments of both Canada and Aotearoa, New Zealand resource a report that outlines steps to be taken towards resourcing and supporting self-governance and self-determination. There is an opportunity to review the historical treaties, some of which John mentioned earlier, and implement them in new ways. An example of this would be the Jade Treaty, which enables Indigenous individuals in Canada to freely travel, live, work, and study in the United States. These types of treaties create new opportunities and allows us to return to our traditional practices of visiting and making relatives beyond our country's borders. Specifically, we want a treaty to be created between Canada and Aotearoa and New Zealand's Indigenous nations. As someone who's recently had the privilege of moving from Canada to Aotearoa, I can see the benefits of this type of treaty. It's been absolutely incredible to see within the last 6 weeks what our small INDIGI-X group was able to accomplish by exchanging ideas, finding inspiration, and developing innovative solutions to complex issues caused by colonization. Imagine what we could accomplish if these types of treaties exist and the benefits it would bring our nations. We also recognize the need for resourcing around self-determination and self-governance. We felt that a treaty between the two countries would open up doors for economic opportunities and free trade, which would increase financial prosperity for Indigenous nations. In conclusion, our desired outcome is for our people to self-govern themselves and to bring back their traditional practices. We feel that making treaties between our countries is one way to accomplish that goal. I'll pass it along to Robin to finish us off.
Tēnā koutou katoa. First, I'd like to thank my group for the privilege of closing our presentation today. And we've selected this quote from Sir Apirana Ngata, "Ma wai e waki te tatau a ngā iwi take, who will open the doors to our prosperity?" On behalf of our group, I'd like to express our acknowledgement to the organisers and participants of INDIGI-X in bringing us together so that we can form bonds and kinship. The invocation I'm about to share to close our presentation is offered by another amazing pillar and knowledge keeper of our people who is no longer with us, our Taranaki elder, Wirangi Waikirepuru. It harnesses the powers of the earth and the universe and lends weight to all that we do for each other, for our relations, our kin, our whananga katoa, our people, planet, and universe. And so in closing, ko rangi, ko papa, ka puta korongo, ko tāne mahuta, ko tangaroa, ko tū mātauenga, ko haumia tiki, ko tāwhiri mātia. Tokona rā, ko rangi ki runga, ko papa ki raro. Ka puta tere tangata ki te whai ao ki te ao marama. E rongo hakairihia ake ki runga, kia tīna hui e, tā ki e. Kia ora mai tātou katoa. Thank you.
Wow, well done, group one. It is always the hardest to go first, and I think you guys knocked it out of the park. Congrats. And yeah, I saw a lot of nodding heads in the audience, so well done. So I'd like to open it up for questions. We have saved a few minutes at each of the presentations to kind of explore some things in more detail. So I haven't seen any questions come through in the chat, but does anybody want to raise their hand to ask one of the group? I know for myself, the first recommendation resonated the most because you just caused me to think about the fact that often in business, the ceremony happens at the end, not the beginning, which is so simple, but so, yeah, something that is so easy to do and starts things off in a good way. Awesome. Miles, so good to see you. Miles is a member of our second cohort. Go ahead, ask your question.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
We
Good,
can.
perfect, because I had mic problems earlier. Great work, loved all of it. Interested, so critical to the self-determination and self-government discussion is the topic, and you guys touched on it, as free and prior informed consent. And so I'm interested in the group's opinion, really. Such a problem, at least in some of the communities I see, is advocating for it, but then maybe clarity around what that means. What does consent mean? It's not that those communities are unable to do it, is that there's no real clear definition that is agreed to in advance or before decisions are made, so that people aren't gaming outcomes. And so I guess I'm curious around if you have any examples you could share, or maybe even thoughts around, just thoughts around that, kind of defining consent. And just maybe in the context, I always like to frame it that, in contracts, you put the language up front so that you're clearly working from the same definition. And so often that doesn't exist. And so this is maybe an opportunity to highlight that. And those communities who have done that work or are in the process of it. Thanks.
I'll jump in here quickly, Miles. Kia ora for your pātai. More of a sharing. So I sit in the space of Indigenous genomics, and in terms of intellectual property rights and protecting our rights and interests, it's upfront and pivotal, the conversation about how our taonga are being homed, and the lack of tikanga that comes around it, and the lack of consent. So it is a topical kōrero at the moment. And part of the exploration I sit in when we talk about genetic information that's been kept, we're talking about engaging our community. So here's what sits for me. Our whānau hapu are excluded from these conversations and excluded from being able to contribute and design what these definitions and what these processes look like. It's really important that we bring our people at the grassroots level whom it affects to answer these questions. So whilst we've had legalese and terms and conditions, you'll find the small print is excluded. So we start with changing that and going back to our first recommendation, ensuring that that sort of information through customs is navigated at the start of the conversation, not partway through the research and not at the end of the space, but at the beginning. Kia ora to my team members who may want to jump in.
Part of the answer, John Snow here. I come from Stony Nakota. I didn't explain that. So we come from the mountain people, and the mountain behind me is my ancestor, and is also the seat of Creator. And so I'm Wakone Winchester. I am the one who speaks about Creator. I'm an ordained minister, but I'm also a Nakota pipe holder. So I carry these two visions forward. In partial answer to your question, we must speak the reality. We must sing the reality. And so if we wait for colonial recognition or permission, it may never come. So we have to be bold and begin signing these things ourselves and come to consensus or agreement in how we're going to proceed. One example is the Buffalo Treaty. We began by singing the songs of the buffalo, and then we began signing the treaty just among North American tribes. So if you get a chance, have a look at that. That gives you a flavor of being bold, but also taking responsibility. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. Great responses. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Miles, for the question. Tanya, you raised your hand next. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to our first group. I was really struck by your recommendations, in particular the recommendation to continue to create treaties between Indigenous peoples, and reflecting on John's words, regardless of and without waiting for colonial permission or recognition. And those words are so strong and pertinent with respect to cultural Indigenous identity within both of our countries. But I wanted to ask a question to provide some context for those of us, particularly New Zealanders on the call, who may not understand how Indigenous identity is, shall we say, afforded or defined by colonial structures within Canada. So an opportunity for you just to provide that context and therefore why this is such an important kaupapa and really profound recommendations.
Thanks, Tanya. Do maybe one of our Indigenous people in Canada want to answer that one? Go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think Kyle has the best perspective from our team on this one.
Throw me in there. Yeah, I mean, context, I suppose. Obviously, I mean, I think for some of you in there, I think we've had a lot of nations and a lot of cultures represented in terms of the Turtle Island landscape, in terms of not only First Nations, but Métis, but also non-status First Nations that have been represented in this cohort in that sort of sense, or even in previous cohorts. So currently, as it stands, as we mentioned in the presentation, there is a strong paternalism in terms of federal government's control on who could be federally recognized as a status Indian or under the Indian Act. And this is a form of legislation from the late 1800s that determines fundamentally a lot in terms of belonging and financial funding in relationship to at least First Nations communities and reserves. In that landscape, the byproduct of that is that you have a lot of people who are seeking citizenship, who are looking for belonging, and you have a lot of individuals who've sort of grown up in collectivity and being fundamentally pitted against each other as there's evolving, you know, as humans evolve and change in identity and proximity to urban spaces and all those kind of change. In Canada, the one thing that our team spoke about a lot is that the sheer geographic landmass of Turtle Island alone is one of incredible context to understand, is that fundamentally someone like myself who's you know, reserve kid from Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe First Nation, but now living in Vancouver, yeah, I could be living in the Ukraine or, you know, Eastern Europe in the same, you know, time it takes to fly. So in that relatively, the culture shifts and changes between, you know, First Nations folks on the West Coast and those on the East. So with that too, the you know, we have so many nations, so many languages, so many different cultures, so many different understandings of relativity and connection. And even though we share the last, 200 to 400 years of colonization and sort of similar experience in the same way that we do across oceans and across continents, there is a necessity for there to be a recognition of the specific epistemology or culture of everyone as they are and as they wish to kind of continue. And I think that that's sort of the kind of landscape that exists in Canada now, where we're sort of at a switching point or a changing point where we're having a lot of these conversations, and conversations that are actually finally allowing those from respective perspectives to have a sort of seat at the room instead of it being sort of top down or federally down, as it has been throughout the 80s and 90s, per se, with Bill C-31 or other components.
Well done, Kyle. I don't know if I could have synthesized that any better. And I think one of the things about INDIGI-X is just seeing the differences in colonization on our peoples, and how our friends in other parts of the world have dealt with it or have not had to deal with it. So thank you for sharing that. We're gonna have 2 more questions. So I'll go to Patricia first, and then Rachel. Welcome, Rachel. And then we'll move on to the next group. Go ahead, Patricia.
Hi, thank you, everybody, and much respect for the cohort that just did their presentation. We understand, I've been a participant in the past. Kyle, you kind of mentioned it. So a lot of our First Nations are transfer payments through federal government. And one of the challenges that I think Miles was alluding to is that one of the biggest challenges with self-governance is how it's not so much from a creator perspective, spiritual leadership perspective, it's how are we going to tax ourselves? How are we going to make up in terms of the federal funding that's coming through that is through the Indian Act? I know that a lot of our First Nations within Canada are now taxing their own people, and there's a new First Nations tax that's going on out there. Was that something that your group had taken into consideration when they talked about the treaties? And one of the other questions is, what would be the top 2 or 3 priorities? One of the major issues that are affecting not just First Nations, but Métis communities within Canada is access to clean water. And so what would be some of the top, is it Indigenous exchange? Is it economic exchange? Is it exchange of ideas? Is water part of the discussion? And so what would be the top 2 or 3 issues of the treaties, and how was there discussion in terms of how we get to that place of self-government and that dependency on federal funding? Hi, thank you.
Not a simple question, and I suspect not a simple response.
I'll take a swing at it. Thank you, John Snow again. What I would say is these are the challenges within the colonial structure. And so if we look to our relationship now, where are our treaties where they have really enunciated all of these subjects and topics you've talked about? So if we see fulfillment of the treaty, some of the elders have said, then we would already be self-sufficient. If the treaty was upheld and stating and sharing the resources as we thought we initially did, there is no need to tax. So there's a lot of unpacking, unfolding we have to do, and it begins by understanding treaty. It deals with the water. One example from our area is that we own the water. We're paid before the province can use the water. We're one of very few in the country that have that right. So I think there's a lot of discussion we need to have as Indigenous people, and to I would encourage out of the box thinking, and that's so difficult in the colonized positions that we're in. So that's a challenge for us, but I believe in the treaty and the answers are there. They were foreseen by our elders through ceremony and in the treaty. Thank you.
Tansei, I can kind of add a little bit to what John said. So we didn't get into all the specific kind of pieces that you touched on. But the one thing that we really did spend a lot of time talking about, that it's really challenging for our communities to, like you said, achieve self-governance and self-determination because we tend to be so reactive with the current colonial structure. And so we really felt that if we want to be successful in this area, we need to have resourcing to return to our traditional forms of leadership. And so a big part of that, which Amanda kind of touched on, was also involving community, and for me as well, young people in a lot of these conversations. So they're not so every 3 years we're starting back at the beginning or if the government changes. And so I think those conversations need to happen, but for us, it was like, we can't have those conversations until we understand why the problems keep existing and why we kind of keep going in this bit of this like rat, or, you know, like you're running a rat kind of. But yeah, so I think that was where we really started. And I could see if we did resource a report, which was what our recommendation was, those would be part of the long-term conversation. And then just in relation to your second question with the exchange, we were really more interested in kind of some of that economic exchange, because again, coming back to resourcing, to be self-governing, you have to have funding. And so that was one potential opportunity that we considered.
Amazing. Thank you, Group 1. Rachel, we'll have your question next, and then we'll move on to Group 2. Go ahead, Rachel. Rachel, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Kia ora tātou.
There we
Ngā
go.
mihi nui kia koutou katoa. I don't believe to belong to any group in particular, but what I do belong to is the mana whenua hapu whānau rangatiratanga o Aotearoa. Now, I don't know whether there are some New Zealand government people in this forum, but it would be interesting to get some feedback from them. Just of recently, our treaty, there's been a trade agreement that's been signed by the British and our New Zealand government. Many of you may already know that our tūpuna, our rangatira, our elders signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi 1840 in good faith. However, it's with their trade agreement that has been established already. And with the UK, they are now claiming that they will not be responsible for their treaty. Now, when our tūpuna signed that treaty, they signed it in good faith, believing that it was also signed by the UK, and in this case, the UK monarchy. But now they're not supporting Te Tiriti o Waitangi Treaty. They're giving the responsibility back to the New Zealand government. I have a copy of their trade agreement. Now, in saying all of that, I mean, there's a second phase to me, and that was to do with one of the largest claims ever in New Zealand, which was the Y262 flora and fauna claim. Now, that had a lot to do with the intellectual property rights of Māori. I'm very passionate about it. I am one of the if you like, the elders connected to one of the original claimants. And I've since taken up their portfolio and have been around their claim for something like 30 more years or so. I just want to acknowledge too our rangatira, Mona Jackson, who has just recently passed away. He was hugely important at the United Nations in referencing, you know, the intellectual property rights of Māori and the intellectual property rights of our Indigenous peoples across the board. Now, he has passed away, so I just want to acknowledge that. He was hugely important to us as tātou te iwi Māori o Aotearoa. Although I can hear you talking about the different treaties and the different in different countries and the colonisation side of things, like you, we also have our issues at home. Some of those issues are we have a lot of legal representation, representatives who try to support us. And I'm talking about us as claimants, fighting for our own intellectual property rights and our assets, our water, our environment, our children, our everything, education, and retaining our tino rangatiratanga, another word used after sovereignty. But in saying that, they are also hitched by Crown laws and their jurisdiction, so they can only go so far. You have some of our New Zealand government sectors here on board. They're aware of that. So, you know, we're not able to move forward. And it appears like that simply because of the governmental Crown Policies Acts that are before us today. If we come together, and this was discussed at the United Nations that I attended several times, around how do we come together? You know, do we like the word Indigenous? Are they putting us in the box so that they don't have to speak to the, as far as I'm concerned, we're Māori. So we put in this box to claim that we're all Indigenous peoples. We are in our own right. But for me, we're Māori and from Aotearoa. It just makes it easier for them. So we do have the same concerns that you have, and I'm sure you already know that. But when you're talking about a different country like Aotearoa, there's many areas that we need to tidy up. But unfortunately, we have many people within our own hapu whānau iwi that have done a lot that compromises our tikanga, our rights as Māori. So, you know, you're going to get together and try and help each other. We need to do that from Aotearoa first, and then reach out and share ideas with others. Now, I'm going to leave my kōrero there, but I wanted to share that, and I'm pleased I was able to make it. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa.
Thank you for your thoughts, Rachel. We really appreciate it, and we're so grateful that you've been able to join us today. I don't know if anybody from the group wants to make any closing words.
I think, John here again, I'll just offer one reflection. And we've seen across the planet how a strategy of divide and conquer has reigned over many continents. And so by reversing that and uniting, I think we become a very powerful reality across the planet. So I encourage you to reach out. I encourage you to connect. And I encourage you to enlarge your vision. Those are my final words.
Skumton, John, and Rachel, and Group 1. Yes, as you can see, INDIGI-X, there's a lot of healing and a lot of emotions and, you know, a lot of issues in front of us. But I think as a collective, we have a hope to begin to unpick some of the harms that have been done. So thank you. Okay, we're going to move to Group 2. I don't even know if it's worth flipping up this slide or not. So Group 2 has titled their presentation Indigify Me. I believe they're going to introduce themselves, so I won't waste any more time, but welcome Group 2.
Kia ora. Kore hi te manu, tākari mai I te ata, ka ao, ka awatea tihei mauri ora. Kia kingi tūheitea po tatau te whero tua whitu, me te whānui o te kahu ariki, rire, hau pai mā rire. E rere haere ana ngā mihi ki te mana whenua o te rohe nei, ki te iwi o Ngāti Whātua me te iwi o Kanata, tēnā koutou. Ki ngā mate o te wā, haere atu rā. Anō hoki ki ētahi tōtara o te ao Māori hoki, kua hinga e noho ana mātou te iwi Māori, I raro I te kapua pauri I tēnei wā. Nō reira, e ngā rangatira moi mai rā. Kia tātou ngā kanohi ora, tēnā tātou. Ki ngā kai karakia, tēnā kōrua, to both sides. Ki ngā minita, e noho mai tēnā kōrua. E aku tuakana, Railing, kōrua ko Tania, e noho mai nei, hei kaitiaki o tēnei kaupapa, mā kōrua mātou e arahi kia whai ai I te aratika, kia tūtuki ai I te whainga, nei te mihi. Kia koutou ngā kaimahi o INDIGI-X, ka aroha koutou, nō reira he mihi. Aroha mai e hara hau I te tangata mōhio ki te kōrero Māori, o tira I tika ana kia mihi atu, kia mihi mai. Ko waio, he uri tēnei a kahununu, mani o poto po Raurangi, no Ngāti Mahuta, Ngāti Rongo mai wahine, Ngāti Puke ko Ngāti Porou, me Ingarani Airani ko tinana me Portugal ahau. Ko Laura Sibilich toku hoa rangatira, ko Laina Wakamos oku tamariki, ko Raymond Otene Makai tōku ingoa. Kia ora everyone, I'm Raymond. I'm going to hand the rāko over to the rest of our whānau. So if y'all can join me, whānau, jump in there to mihi to everybody. Kia ora everyone.
I guess I'll start with mine in terms of the team and saying who I am. My name is Patrick Kitchen. I'm a Métis descendant of the South Slave region in the Northwest Territories of Cree, Chippewan, and European descent. I'm residing on the Haldimand Tract, traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada and Haldimand treaties. I am a creative director with over 25 years experience in advertising and marketing industry, now representing Indigenous business and people in Canada and abroad.
Kia ora tātou, ko Ngangataha Te Maunga, ko Te Aroa Te Waka, ko Ngāti Whakaue Te Iwi, no Rotorua Ahau, ko Cheyenne Kahukiwa Toko Ingoa. I'm a business consultant by day.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Hukarangi Te Maunga, ko Waipu Tāua, ko Ngāti Porou Te Iwi, no te tai rāwhiti awau, ko John Tura taku ingoa. Kia ora, my name is Jordan. I'm CEO, co-founder of Tuatai Creatives. We're a creative agency based in Queenstown, and we're just a creative collective practicing in contemporary Māori art and Pacific art forms. So we do a range of different things from traditional tattooing, toi Māori, and digital design as well. And yeah, proud of Aotearoa and the project that we've come together. So kia ora.
I'm not sure if Eric's here or not, but so I'll go in. I'm from Taranaki, Aotearoa, and Hapu's Pukitapu. My name's Joffrey. I'm a kopu. I work as a producer in immersive media, and I'm the janitor of the group. Thank you.
I think you meant matua, so kia ora, matua. Yeah, thank you everybody. Aroha mai, Eric's on the call
Yeah,
too.
I am here. I wanted to let the talent go first, So
Whatever.
I was doing that. ISKWÊWAK, o Siamasiaya, Aotearoa, Seatliston, TL Squee, Quachiam of the Stalo people, Etutlo unceded Tamuk, Uto, Palau tribe. My dear friends, I'm Seatliston from Chiam First Nation of the Stalo people on the unceded territory of the Palau tribe. Thank you.
Kia ora. Yeah, so kia ora te all our rōpū who's mihi to you all. So there's all our lovely faces up there on screen. I just wanted to say, yeah, I thought I'd start the presentation with tikanga and try my best at speaking te reo Māori. I'm on the journey and I'm learning. My two boys are bilingual, so I'm still a baby in that world. But best way to do it is to just jump in the deep end. But we're here for another kaupapa, and we've been very, very excited to get our creative brains together. Like all of my cohorts here, I'm a creative as well, and we have come up with something really cool. But wouldn't it be great if there was a place to go, a platform, an app, a website, whether you're in creative advertising industry or an artist, where you can be honored for your art, your creative skill set, where you can meet other like-minded whānau family, build confidence and creative resource, and also build alliances with commercial partners, whether in advertising, marketing, design, or the art worlds. And this stems from the idea of not seeing many of us in that space. So I'll take you into our kōrero, which is Indigify Me. Next slide, Kazi. So obviously we start with a problem in the creative world, and we do our best to use our strategic and creative minds to help solve that. So the problem is a myriad of things, and we'll take you through those specifically, but just to give you a little bit of a rundown, cultural misappropriation, skill shortage, skill obscurity, industry obscurity, identity issues, and resource scarcity. So next slide, Kazi. I'll start with this this quote that we pulled out: cultural misappropriation. So cultural appropriation is the unacknowledged or appropriate adoption of the customs, practices, ideas, and other cultural elements of one people or society by members of another, and typically more dominant people or society, often for personal or financial gain. So we want to get in on that. So cultural misappropriation of Indigenous arts and creativity is prevalent. It's in all forms of our mahitoi, our ringatoi, our whakairo, and as the quote says, taken from the mainstream and taken from us to do certain things. So we got our heads together and we're thinking of the problems that were involved, and aroha mai with emergency. Yeah, so I'll just read. I'll read the slide quickly. But cultural misappropriation of Indigenous arts and creativity is prevalent throughout our history and is still common today. With the emergence and rapid growth of new digital technologies and platforms, the demand for digital content has increased and has the need for authentic Indigenous art and digital content. And so, I guess if we can think about this in the terms of our where we all sit within different commercial spaces, we see a lot of this, and it's horrible to kind of think that this is still going on. I might actually let the bro Patrick jump in on this slide.
Essentially, in our industry, it's become very important that we protect our customs and practices. Agencies across the world have same issues we have in terms of finding Indigenous creatives and hiring non-Indigenous creatives to represent without consultation and without and so the end result is that this results in cultural misappropriation. So we have identified, next slide, several different aspects of this, from skill shortages. Indigenous economy in Canada and New Zealand contributes a significant portion to the GDP and is growing exponentially. Our businesses are expanding rapidly. However, the demand for Indigenous skills far outweighs the supply of Indigenous skills, and the gap is growing. We can't find skilled workers, or they are not identified for us to be able to find. So this has become a real issue. This has become a real issue in our agencies. Skills obscurity. This just relates specifically to the idea that we do not have the skill sets. We're not focused into these different institutions to learn these skills. We're not being hired into specific positions where we can learn this to be able to become a bigger part of the story and discussion.
Yeah, to talk with that too, Patrick. Yeah, I think it's the people in the commercial world just don't see us, and so they have to go, you know, to other parties to help produce work that they, you know, they want to use within the culture. So.
Yeah, so in the industry, that's where industry obscurity comes in. I myself, a 25-year veteran of tier 1 agencies in some of the largest marketplaces in Canada, I didn't identify as Métis. Ray, I'm sure, same thing. BBDO didn't identify as Maori. So within our own industries, we're silent. We're trying to find a solution to the problem where we can become more vocal about who we are and what we bring to the table.
Yeah, and if I can kind of recap those first couple of things, you know, cultural appropriation, we see it happening while being in the industry within, like our Batua said, those tier 1 network agencies. And because you're just surrounded by people who aren't like you, it's really hard to have a voice. While we do speak up's never really sort of listened to, or, you know, it eventuates to anything. So, and then we lead into the identity issues, I guess.
Yeah, through colonization and subsequent policies, removal of Indigenous identity from Indigenous people, causing intergenerational trauma and identity crisis. This is a big topic of discussion in Canada right now. And our people still suffer from a lack of confidence or interest of Indigenous people to identify as Indigenous. It's not always in the best interest for a creative to identify as Indigenous due to the cultural perception and systemic racism within the hiring practices, especially prevalent in the advertising world.
Yeah, and I think one of the real poignant kōrero that came out of our group's discussion was from our other rangatira, Cheyenne, where confidence was one of the things that you need within that space. And so, you know, if we look at that confidence, once you have that in that space, you're able to then express your whatever mātauranga you can bring to the table as not only just a commercial creative, but also the tikanga that you've learned, te reo Māori, mātauranga, any of your, you know, your artistic sides that are taha Māori, you know, your Indigenous side. When you merge that together, it's powerful. So these are some of the things that we identified within this kind of raft of problems. So next slide, please. Yeah, resource scarcity. So it kind of works a couple of ways. So resource scarcity from this perspective of our Indigenous people to be able to come up in the world of commercial creativity. And by commercial creativity, I mean the things that I mentioned before, you know, the advertising, design, marketing, tech spaces. Let me just find my thought here. Being able to merge, I think, those two things so you can operate in all of those spaces at a commercial level. And then on the other side of that, if we look at people who are wanting to, and a lot of brands are doing it here in Aotearoa, I'm not too sure what the environment is like in Canada, but a lot of our businesses are wanting to imbue, you know, te reo Māori across their range of products or services or whatever that may be. And it's really hard to find someone who's can be advising those things, but also from a perspective of commercial creativity as well. So everything has to be done by tikanga and be tika, but there needs to be a level of understanding of the commercial sort of world that mātauranga may be put into. And so it's about, you know, and we always go back to the rangatahi, we talked about that a lot, bringing them up so that, you know, because there's a renaissance of language and tikanga and all of those things. And if we can mix that in with that commercial realization, wow, powerful kaupapa, I reckon. So yeah, I think that kind of talks to that. Do you want to add anything to that, Whānau, to that slide?
No, that sums it up fairly well. Even in Canada, the call for our voices to be heard through the non-Indigenous community and non-Indigenous businesses is quite large. But yes, that is the most common thing I hear, is that we just can't find the resources, we can't find the people to speak for us. So, and
there are some brilliant artists, and it would be great to have a place to be able to, and that's getting into the solution, you know, to where we can do those things. The solution. So kia ora whānau. We came up with this this way to do that. So if we look at all of those problems, I guess if you can recap those problems, it would be cultural misappropriation, which we don't want any of. We want to follow tikanga. We want to be tika with any communications or design or marketing or whatever. So what if there was a place that where we could live, our Indigenous whānau, our Māori whānau whaia, you know, by where we can come in at all levels across the scale of creativity. That word is big. Creativity is a big word, but I think it has places where it lives on different scales. So right from the commercial creativity, you know, working on big brands, using our some of our ideas. I know not all the ideas are tika to be able to be used, but the more common ones, and te reo across commercial spaces. Here's your place to be. So Indigify me. And like I said, could be an app, could be a website, could be a platform. It's going to be a movement. So we're all going to get behind this movement, and we'll show you a little bit of what that means. Yeah, so as we said, it needs to be a safe space. It needs to be able to provide educational, commercial opportunities for our creatives. And like I said, that word creative means a lot of things. So right from our creative directors, producers, right down to our, you know, muka specialists, you know, our weavers, our whakairo artists, our, I'm not too sure of the terminology, whānau, with the Canada, but I love your beautiful carvings, you know, your carving specialists. It would be great for everybody to, all of our Māori and Indigenous whānau to live in one space and know what part of that space they could belong to, but we all together as well, because we all work off each other. And so, you know, it's a place that's void of any cultural misappropriation, because there will be educational resource to teach within our space too. And that goes back to Cheyenne's point of confidence, because we know across our Māori here in Aotearoa, we have different levels of understanding of tikanga, mahitoi, all of those beautiful things that make us up as Māori. There are different levels. And we've talked about many sort of anecdotes. I've seen our whānau online saying, oh yeah, Choice, you can use that. But hey, we know sometimes that's not tika. So this is a beautiful safe space for our people to live, to be able to know where they will sit within a commercial sort of scale, know that they can be educated within certain things within our I guess our, I don't know what the Māori word is, but our kaupapa. And then also, yeah, finding commercial opportunities. And it should be a space where everyone in the mainstream looks to, because they'll be like, oh, yo, that's where we can go and talk to someone who's a whakairo artist, or here's a commercial creative, whatever. So, Patrick, do you want to jump in, brother? Just to maybe talk of this slide.
Well, this, I mean, the whole idea is that we're proposing to form a national council to represent each Indigenous peoples, starting with the first council for New Zealand to represent Maori peoples, and Canada to represent First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. What this is basically speaking back to the first group's idea of identification. So we want to be able to identify who can sign up for this app and who qualifies for the idea of Indigify Me. And we've sort of gone into a bit of that in the next couple slides, I think, in terms of just illustrating what groups we are actually going after. So next slide.
I can talk about this, bro. So yeah, going into that that digital registry, because we were all talking about how do we make sure that this place is a safe place. There needs to be a certain level of certification around, you know, whether you are on the kaupapa, you know, kaupapa Māori, kaupapa Indigenous, and also to, I guess, also, you know, thinking about what's happened over time. Are people Indigenous? Have they heard whispers? So there's a lots of kōrero around this. So we kind of have just done it into a couple of points, and we know there will be some whakaaro and kōrero coming in this, but that's cool. We're gonna do that. So yeah, developing a digital registry, which will first be a website that can verify and authenticate Indigenous creatives. So what that means is we can verify and, you know, authenticate whether you obviously do have the whakapapa, the genealogy to our people. I think that's important. Also, you know, Indigenous artists and creatives to kind of figure out whether they're establishing meaningful connections to all of our kaupapa, our Māori, our Indigenous, by using this, you know, using this platform. You want to jump in here, brother? I'm just losing
resources and information provided to assist with upskill and building capabilities as it relates to customs practices, ideas, and other cultural elements within Indigenous arts and creatives. Indigenous creatives are more visible and more likely to be represented at the agency level. So what we're doing is opening this up to businesses to be able to sign in and see the creatives that we have available. So it's a good resource for them to be able to find us. So yeah, vendors are safely engage with verified and authentic Indigenous creatives. Next slide.
And I guess yeah, absolutely.
So we've developed an authentication process. Next slide. We want to create a well-reasoned authentication process. The criteria for authentication of Indigenous artists and creatives will be created by each of the national councils. Because we both have very different needs for our countries. We have, however, identified universal benchmarks for this authentication process, Indigenous genealogy, intentions that align with Indigenous values, and to show a willingness to protect the cultural heritage, customs, and traditions and creative practices.
Thank you for bringing that around, Patrick. I think I might have jumped the gun before and and talked about that in the first slide, but kapai. I might talk to this as well. So yeah, I guess if you look at those and what I was saying before is there should be a level of protection of our Indigenous and Māori people to make sure that everyone is, you know, I guess following tikanga, and whether that tikanga you've learned before, this is a good way to learn it. So everything's a learning journey with us all, like I said, on a different scale. Lots of us Māori, urban, so you know, the idea that even if you don't have that tie to your tūranga waiwai or your whakapapa, and you know that you are Māori, this could be a place that would be safe for you to be able to learn those things, you know, like, because sometimes us Māori will look out and go, oh, look what that Māori doing over there, or that Māori doing over there. But wouldn't it be great if we could kind of have a safe space for people to learn about those things and understand why we have these things we say or whatever? But like, it's a safe space. You can, and talking really, really hugely to our allies as well, which I think we'll probably get into the next slide. Maybe not. Oh yeah, this straight up just kind of just says, you know, what this platform would be for, you know, yeah, protecting our cultural heritage, customs, traditions, creative practices, you know, against misappropriation, and yeah, huge one, assisting and upholding the mana of all of our Indigenous art forms, however they are mixed within a commercial reality, or if they're traditional. So what a great space to be able to be and operate and show awhi and love to one another in that space to get better, to be able to commercialize in a way that's tika. And, you know, I think moving forward, because we were just talking about our kids, like they're so smart, they're so witty, so quick. You know, like if you look at our brother Taika Waititi's movies, you know, like just those kids, man, there was no casting for those kids. They were just down from the coast, you know, so like they just quick, smart. And that's what I mean by our kids being super smart and being able to be brought up in, hopefully a lot of our kids are being brought up in the tikanga and te reo Māori, and then being able to come into a world like the creative industries, because I know as a kid, man, I just didn't know what I was wanting to do. And I was just tutu as, and you know, an industry where I can roll up to work in shorts and jandals and just be creative. It's been pretty good. I've been in the industry for nearly 20 years as a creative. That's a weird thing to say about, you know, a title. What do you do, bro? I'm a creative. Oh, yo, okay, ka pai. But you know, like commercially, creatives are seen as the, you know, some of the rangatira in those spaces, right? And so I want that opportunity to be afforded to our kids. So if there was something that, you know, if we had a platform like this, that you know, making sure we are staying true to what our tupuna has put in place for us to learn and you know, take the mantle off and continue, as long as all those things are tika and tikanga is upheld. And there's a huge, you know, kōrero. We'd hope to start this journey and yeah, help protect things, because we know a lot of our Māori are doing things all over the place, which is ka pai, and we'd love to be a safe space to help awhi those journeys wherever they are. But yeah, so protection. So next slide, cousin. Oh, yeah, verification. This was a big kōrero, so I may not have explained it too well in the first few slides, but verification can mean a number of things. Obviously, you know, like my context is going and typing into Waikato, you know, Waikato iwi to register myself as a tribal member or Ngati Awa or whatever, wherever. And, you know, there's a verification process. There's a whakapapa process. So, you know, this will be the same and to a certain degree, however we work that out. But there is the ability with all this new technology, and our matua Joff will be able to speak to that. He's a rangatira in that space of, you know, digital authentication. And so you might have heard of NFTs before. It's a bit of a buzzword going around the traps, but digital certification using blockchain technology. So making sure our whānau are looked after across the internet. And again, some of those resources may be within that educational component to the Indigi-X app. So yeah. You know, we all collaborate. Look at us now. This is us. You know, this is how we do it. And like I said, I think some of us come from different whakaaro, but what we've done with this kaupapa is just brought it all together, because we know it can live together and it can be sort of segmented into a way that anyone looking into this app, whether it be our whānau, our Indigenous, or allies who are maybe in the commercial space, looking into it, oh yeah, cool, I'm going to go talk to this whakaaro artist. Oh yeah, this is what he's done, this is his profile, this is his portfolio. So it's building all of those really cool things that we're all used to being on technology now, and that will help the collaboration kaupapa too. Yeah, I think this was just talking to that section within our Indigi-X app. So if you break it down, it's pretty simple. You know, there's the education, there's the commercial, and education meaning resources that are created to help you on whatever journey you are in with your mahitoi or your commercial journey. So say, for example, I want to learn about, you know, whakairo. Oh, cool. I'll go and have a look at a bit of work that Lance Ngata has done. He's my kaita. You know, he might have a video up there teaching you certain pūrākau or stories around, you know, what do you call it? You know, like a story. And so, you know, you can go into the educational part of that. And you might be a commercial creative. So you might go there and there's the cross collaboration right there. So resources is kind of endless. You might have all seen Masterclass. It's a really huge kind of mainstream resource by where they get like Periscobal, and she'll teach you how to be a hip hop dancer. Same thing, but with an Indigenous sort of spec. And so, obviously Taika's going to be in it. So come to our platform, Indigify Me. Taika's going to, he's going to certify it as well. So he's going to do the advertising for us now. All good. I have a call with him later on. But anyways, yeah, absolutely the increased representation, making us more visible. So right now I'm being hounded by the biggest networks on earth. So IPG, Dentsu, who are Starcom, Publicis. These are the giant advertising agency networks, and they all come into this little Māori from Glenfield on the North Shore, Te Raki Pai Whenua. So, we can have a really huge impact in this global space of commercial advertising and marketing and design. We just haven't had a place where we can all live within that space to uffy each other on that journey. So we're being really selfish here as creatives, because we feel like there's a great career for our kids to be able to jump into. So that's what that increased representation is. Just make it, and that filters through all of our mahi, because right now I'm working on some mahi for a big brand, and they're wanting someone who understands the stories about this over here. So this would be the place for them to be able to access. And there's lots of other kōrero around that, how that kind of works in a commercial sense, but we'll get into that maybe at another time. Safe engagement. Obviously, we would love to, when we engage, we'll use the mātauranga of this group, but then, man, we are going to engage a whole lot of other rangatira. We know that we need that. By no means that I would even put my hand up for anything. And we have our cultural strategic advisors in-house at our agency. And then obviously even further, we'd love to have our kaumātua, our Pākeke, who have a load of knowledge that we would love them to be involved with this kaupapa, this movement, because all our respect comes from that connection. And so if we look at the specifics of the safe engagement, that will extend to obviously the vendors that are using the space as our Indigenous and Māori people, and further, and also our allies and our stakeholders. And allies is a really interesting word, so to talk to that a little bit, what's the time? Because I'm probably going way over time, but anyway, allies are the people who really do uffy us and uffy our culture. And when they want to uffy us because they are super scared of even approaching anything in our world. So when they come to us and they want us to tautoko them in a space, we'll always do it tika, and we'll just say sometimes you're not ready for it. Come back and see us once you've had some kōrero elsewhere. So this is one of those places. And I mean, this could extend to cultural advisors within that space too. So we'll have a lot of support. Yeah. At the end of the day, I think, we just want to make sure our people have a good life. And we know that, we're talking about sustainability, that will be metrics across a lot of things. Flexibility is huge within our agency. We've got a whole lot of, Māori wahine who have kids, and our young fellas who are going to kapahaka or wherever. So flexibility is really huge in our world. And so we think being able to have your own direction and being able to help commercialize that direction, because of the resources that are within this Indigify Me space, that literally could help you from a business perspective as well. Not just thinking about just your creative self, but also, may want to start a business. So this type of platform could help equip you with a lot of resource to be able to do so, and maybe something specifically built in for that. So, next steps. What are our next steps? They are, endorsement of Indigify Me with a digital registry. Patrick, you want to jump in, brother? Or Cheyenne, actually.
Yeah.
Nah, kapai.
Okay, so basically this is what we're asking. To make this thing happen, what we're doing is creating an endorsement of Indigify Me digital registry, recognizing the cultural appropriation as fraud and create legislation and policies that help prevent, detect, and respond to cultural appropriation as fraud. Establish an Indigenous governed working committee in Aotearoa and Canada to research and review strategy to monitor and protect Indigenous artwork. Establish a universal Indigenous creative network and an annual Indigenous creative forum to connect and collaborate. And then we've given a small basic breakdown of what we think that'll cost to create the program outline.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of mahi to get done before we even produce this platform, but you all know what Spotify is, you all know what Airbnb is. This is the platform we're going to create for our people. And we definitely think it would help us, realize our potential fully, not only from a mātauranga tikanga Māori perspective, but also from a commercial, economics kind of perspective as well. So, I think I'll shut up now. And if anyone else from Aotearoa wants to have a kōrero, yo, kia ora.
Thanks for listening.
Yo.
Thank you, group 2. I just reading all the comments in the chat. There's definitely some amazing energy behind your idea. And I think the first couple of slides, it wasn't obvious to me. Like, obviously it was obvious to me that you're the creative group because I've been with you through the program. But I think your solution could be developed to help Indigenous people in various industries, right? And I think acknowledging that having a safe space for people to connect and learn from one another and further refine their own identity as Indigenous professionals in that industry is so important. So thank you for that. I'm going to just limit it to one question, if that's okay, just because we're running behind a little bit. But Vanessa, do you want to go ahead and ask away?
Sure, thank you. It's funny that I'm on here with this particular topic right now because our little company is doing exactly that. We actually launched, I wouldn't say it's a pilot project, but it's a concept project. And on Monday, we released some NFTs. We're the first actual Indigenous organization, business, whatever you want to call us, in Canada to actually do NFTs. And we're calling it 400 Drums. It is taking the actual drum, painting it, putting different layers of the NFT into it, all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, we have a website, 400 Drums, but part of that whole piece is authenticity. How do we keep that ours? How do we keep the other people who, again, are misappropriating our artwork and putting out their NFTs? Because we are aware of 2 NFT projects in Australia that saying they're Indigenous, but they're not. So we're having that discussion ourselves actually right around 6 o'clock Vancouver time. I'm on, I actually have the privilege of residing on the Tsleil-Waututh Reserve here in North Vancouver in British Columbia. So Eric, you're not too far away compared to the other guys. But what I was wondering, is your presentation available to us? Like, would I be able to get a copy of it? And question number 2, who in your group would love to join us in further conversations with regards to this? Because our NFTs are going to be raising money, of course. Awesome. I will put my email in the chat. Because, oh, I lost my train of thought there. But it's one of those things that we have to take care of. Our company also wrote a number of white papers with regards to data sovereignty, and who's going to own that data, even if you do have a registry? Who's going to own that? Because the government, oh, I won't say anything about the government. I saw Patrick on the line. Sorry, Patrick. But it's one of those things that we're talking about right now. And Raymond, you mentioned the certification in the blockchain itself. is that going to be the only way? Who says that we're authentic? Who says it's authentic, that whole validity stuff? So if there is anybody who would be interested in helping us with that discussion, I'd be more than happy to put your names forward to our group and see where we go from there. So I'll just put my email in the chat.
Yeah, kia ora, Vanessa. Yes, that's why I think it's going to be a larger kōrero, larger talking circle, I think, around that validity. And there was a huge, I mean, we would have spent a couple of hours talking about just that one little tiny thing. Who gets to decide? I think we have different metrics between the countries of, whakapapa, and so I mentioned the iwi, like if somewhere within your whakapapa that, I think it's a couple of generations, then you whakapapa to Māori. And I understand and definitely understand that it's not the same as in Canada. And we had a lot of choice discussions with Patrick and Eric around that kaupapa and that whakaaro is completely different. So that would be, and like I said, this platform won't be going ahead until everything's tika amongst our ropu, everything's good, true and good across the ropu. So we would have to have a whole lot of rangatira be able to kōrero within that space. So yeah.
And just to, not that anybody needs Vanessa to vouch for her, but Vanessa is also a member of our inaugural exchange and a member of INDIGI-X's advisory committee. So yeah, it's there's so many synergies in this program. It's just crazy. But anyhow, I think we're going to move along, if that's okay with everybody. So thank you again, group 2, and thank you for all of the energy in the group chat. So we're going to skip ahead to group 3. This is an all women's group, which I'm very excited to hear from. And the title of their presentation is Rematriation, a Full Circle of Circles. So go ahead, group 3.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, aku mihi kia koutou I runga I te kaupapa o te wā. Greetings to you all. I just wanted to start with a few brief acknowledgements. Tēnā korua Bob, ko Eugene. Thank you for your karakia this morning. And to Raylene, the Potoko Manua of INDIGI-X. Tēnā koe, tēnā hoki koe Tanya. And in the spirit of our presentation today, I just want to acknowledge all of our ancestors, and in particular, we pay tribute to all Indigenous matriarchs. So if I could just start by introducing the members of our group today. So firstly, we have Teresa Tepania Ashton, and unfortunately she can't be with us today because she is at the funeral of her mentor, Dame June Jackson. Moi mai rai te mārei kura. And Teresa, our thoughts are with you today. Secondly, we have Dr. Lana Whiskey Jack, who's from the Saddle Lake Cree Nation. We have Raylene Young, who's controlling the screen for us, and she is a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. And finally, we have Amanda Buffalo, who is a displaced Indigenous person living in the Yukon. And I'd like us to take a moment to celebrate Amanda, actually, as she's really recently submitted her dissertation. So kei runga noa tu koe Amanda, well done. And finally, ko ai, I'm Nicola Kitty Smith, and I belong to the Waikato, Ngāti Maniapoto and Taranaki tribes. So tēnā koutou. So I'm just going to start by discussing our project and its purpose, and then Raylene will take over, so you won't have to hear from me the whole time. And she's going to present our recommendations. And then if Amanda and Lana want to jump in and add anything that we may have forgotten at the end, they will do that. Cool. Okay, so as Raylene said, our project title is Rematriation, a Full Circle of Circles. And the purpose of our Full Circle of Circles is to exchange and bridge matriarchal knowledge between the descendants of the original matriarchs of what is now known as New Zealand and Canada, to revitalise and reclaim our matriarchal stories, rites of passage, authority, and sovereign power with our families, communities, and nations, with and for our diverse genders, and especially for our men. So just to give you a little bit of context around that, we refer to a full circle. And so we need to start by looking at the very beginning and then coming through to the past, the present, and on to the future in order to come full circle. So I'm sure many of you know that in traditional times in both Canada and Aotearoa, New Zealand, women were considered important and were revered, and they fulfilled key roles in our communities. And the importance of women in the beginning can be seen in our origin stories, which include a number of female deities, and in particular, Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother, but also Hene Ahuone, Hene Titama, and many more. So that's where we start from. Moving on to our past, I think we're all, again, well aware that colonisation has had serious and long-lasting impacts, and in particular on Indigenous women. Traditional philosophies, values, and ways of life were dismissed in favour of the colonisers' patriarchal belief system, and there was a forced forgetting. So colonialism disenfranchised women and took them from the positions of power and authority that they had traditionally enjoyed. Okay, so moving further around the circle to the present, we believe that rematriation is the medicine that the world needs. So we want to see the stories that have been forgotten or lost reclaimed. And the patriarchy needs to be dismantled for everyone, not just for women, but also for men. And we think that language will play a key role in that. This language and our words are medicine. I wanted to talk really briefly about the traditional star teachings and prophecy, which Lana shared with us around the small dipper, the woman's pipe, and the large dipper, the men's pipe. And that says that for the last 7 generations, we've been under the time of men. And now we have moved into the time of women, the woman's pipe or the small dipper. So the matriarchal energies, teachings, and wisdom are the medicine this world needs in order to restore balance and harmony. And you'll see we've got some beautiful words there, which I won't read out to you, but moving to the future and coming full circle, we would like to see uncolonial, matriarchal, and equal society. So we had a number of ideas about how we could do this, and you're seeing the first one, which is the establishment of a website. And our key goal is to build on our current small New Zealand, Canada rematriation circle and to continue that online and in person when we can, and to expand that circle to include all of our other amazing Indigenous women in New Zealand and in Canada. We'll be focused on discussions on rematriation in the past, present and future through storytelling, through sharing experiences, through mentorship and working on strategy and community together. The website, we hope, will be a place to share information and resources. And we've got a couple of examples there already around, I think, the belly button teachings and moss bags and swings. What's that one? Oh, the cope up on the couch, and many more to be added. We also thought that this would be an international platform of women supporting each other and learning from each other. We've started working on a rematriation womanifesto, sorry, that's hard to say. And we're also hoping to create a toolkit or a bundle for men. Amanda's Yukon elders always say, an eagle can't fly with one wing. We need balance. We need our men to make our circle whole for the support and benefit of diverse genders. So it's envisioned that one of the first steps or key goals will be strategizing around how we can bring men into the circle in a kind and gentle way. I think we've got a little bit on the website about that, Raylene, maybe? Can't remember where. Here we go. So there's a number of questions to consider, and probably we haven't thought of them all, but we've got some ones around how we can re-engage our men with dignity and not take power, but claiming the power that we already possess as Indigenous matriarchs. How can we inform our men? How can we support our men to engage with our women with love? And what would we want to share with men about traditional stories? And informing the men of today from a future perspective, which will include driving the matriarchal side into education as well. I think that was it from me. Shall I hand over to you, Raylene? Kia ora.
Yeah, absolutely. Tansei, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to move on and just cover some recommendations we came up with. We thought it was best based on the recommendations and how they kind of came to be within our group discussions over the past few weeks that we separate them out. So we have recommendations here for government, for community, as well as industry. So I'm going to start off with government first. So our first recommendation is that they fund establishment costs, including a website, materials, and ongoing promotions and awareness of Rematriation for Full Circle of Circles, which is this program. Kind of tying into that, number 2 is fund and support a 2-year pilot for an in-person exchange and bridge for matriarchal knowledge gathering between the descendants of the original matriarchs of what is now known as New Zealand and Canada, to connect and collaborate in revitalizing and reclaiming our matriarchal stories, rites of passage, authority, and power, to create a bundle for communities, industries, and especially to share with our men. So this is a toolkit with things that people can use to help. Also, to make mandatory Indigenous languages, matriarchal teachings, histories, and creation stories into primary education for all children in what is now known as New Zealand and Canada. We know that it's very important that these teachings be given at a young age, and they're very useful and helpful and good things to grow up with based on a lot of personal experience we've heard within this group. As well, the last recommendation for government is to enhance Indigenous language development, including the development of Indigenous curriculum and pedagogy that reflect knowledge systems, worldviews, and matriarchal community structure as communicated and reflected in the language through connection to land and matrilocal land use practices. Next, we have 3 recommendations for community. So our recommendations are Indigenous leaders, governance structures, supporters, and community members work and support one another in developing, enacting, and enforcing tribal laws to end gender and sexual violence. Number 2 is create matriarchal societies of wise, kind, truthful grandmothers to advise local governance structures. And 3 is to revitalize Indigenous languages that come from the land, who we understand to be our mother and are inherently matriarchal. Lastly, we have recommendations here for industry. Number 1 is to begin from the premise that the land is a living relative and all Indigenous peoples belong to and are claimed by the land. Their relationship to the land and the cosmos is sacred and reciprocal. Colonial governments do not hold authority over the lands and are not authorized to make decisions on behalf of the land. This means industries must work with and for Indigenous communities with respect, gratitude, and humility. Number 2 is to create and enforce policies that have a 0 tolerance for violence against women and gender diverse people, sexualized assault and harassment, and human trafficking, especially for the purpose of sexual exploitation of women, children and youth, and gender diverse people. 3, make Indigenous matriarchal and diverse gender teachings mandatory in the oil and gas industry, and training with the goal to end gender and sexual violence. This one is specifically based on the outcome of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls final report that was recently released here in Canada. And number 4 is to ensure all employees, contractors, subcontractors, and third parties receive training specifically about anti-violence and understand trauma-informed approaches within the industry and within life in general. Hi, thank you all for listening. And now I'll allow our other group members who haven't spoken yet to add anything that they may see fit.
I'd like to thank both Emeline and Nicola for sharing beautifully our rematriation presentation. Hi.
So I want to say sugasima to the presenters, and I did also want to add that I think that for me personally, I think we need to go beyond kind of the notion of trauma-informed, where it kind of pathologizes the victim's suffering. And we need to move also towards a violence-informed approach and lens that talks about the role of the perpetrators in acts of violence and aggression, particularly with respect to Indigenous communities, so that the responsibility is not being held by those who experience the violence, but rather by those who are choosing to use it. So thank you. Wow, I just want to acknowledge that is the first presentation that has ever made me cry. Yeah, what a powerful topic. And if I can offer anything, it is my full commitment to help you action this, because I think it is so important. And I can already see the benefits, if not only in the energy industry in Canada. So thank you so much for articulating it in such a beautiful way and just presenting it with so much heart. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or wants to share any stories. I would like to leave a little bit of room and maybe encourage some of the men in our circle to offer some words, perhaps. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank all my sisters for their work. Our prayers and blessings go to them. In our Nakota way, it's wakone wia. Wakone wia is the woman pipe holder, the woman who speaks about Creator. And that's where healing begins. So I'm glad that you shared that, and I stand with you to help if you need for the trauma-informed training and caring, not only for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, but also we need this trauma-informed training and care for the unmarked graves. As we move forward, we have to lift those up as well. So thank you for your words.
Do we have anybody else that wants to offer a few words? Yeah, what a powerful topic. And the most recommendations tabled by one group ever. So congratulations. Wonderful work. Okay, so we've made it to our last group, last but not least. I'm really excited about this presentation. It has been something that has been on my mind since the beginning of INDIGI-X. So yeah, I'll hand it over to group 4, who are going to talk to us about Indigenous youth leadership, exploring cross-cultural exchanges.
Inga mana, inga reo, inga karangaranga maha, tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnei te mihi atu kia INDIGI-X mo te tautoko te kaupapa i tēnei rā. Ko Renata West toko ingoa, he uri tēnei no Ngāti Awa, ngai tūhoi Aotearoa hoki. My name is Renata West, and I'm a New Zealand Māori ordinarily resident in the traditional lands of the Tongva people in Los Angeles, America. It's fitting that we follow the previous presentation because it has been my pleasure to have worked for the last 6 weeks with this specific group of strong mana wahine. Being the lone tane of this particular group, the very capable members of our team have helped me expand my worldview specifically. We've asked the question and we've worked together to explore a question that our ancestors asked themselves in times of old. That question is, I wonder if we come from here. Today, if we move this into a modern context, I guess the question therefore translates to, I wonder if this is where I'm meant to be. Very shortly, I'll hand over to the team to introduce themselves, but a note before the start of our presentation that the word rangatahi will be used often, and this term will be used interchangeably with the English term for youth. Without further ado, I hand it over to our team to introduce themselves. Tēnā tātou.
Thank you, Renata. Ani Bojo, my name is Savannah Chiplow. I'm a Two-Spirit Anishinaabe from Mississauga First Nation, and I'm part of the Canada group, and I'm currently living on Treaty 13 territory. I'll pass it off to Jessica now.
Mauri ora kia tātou katoa, ko Jessica Smith tōku ingoa. He uri ahau no Mokai Pātia, no te Aotearoa Pāparangi Ngai Tahu Oke, no Aotearoa hau. Jessica Smith, Aotearoa, New Zealand, from the tribes of Mokai Pātia, Te Haunui Pāparangi Ngai Tahu, and I'm coming to you today from Te Awa o Wanganui. Kia ora. We don't have Marina on the line today. She is he māwiwi ia. Ahui anō, ahui te rākau kia koe lea.
Ani bonjour, Leah Nadishnikas. Hi everyone, my name is Leah and I'm Ojibwe Métis. I come from Port Severn, Ontario, near Georgian Bay, and my traditional name is womxn, which means the light of dawn, robin woman. So I'm coming to you today from Ottawa, and it's the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin peoples. I've been here for about 3 years, and I'm very excited to be part of this group. So I just wanted to start everybody off with, a thought-provoking question and, get you thinking a little bit. So I want everyone to take a moment and just maybe close your eyes. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I want you to think if there was ever a time in your life or an experience that made something click to you, something that was so inspiring, so impactful that it led to a chain of actions that led you to where you are today. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because from my own experience, having that moment actually changed my course and has brought me to where I am today, and has also brought me to looking back into my Indigenous culture, which is something that I didn't grow up with. So with that being said, I'd like you all to move forward with an open heart and open mind as we give this presentation. And I will pass it over to Jessica to introduce the next slide. Miigwech.
Meaningful opportunities, meaningful moments, and those impressions of those meaningful people and important moments are always things that influence and shape our lives. And so our question today is around how can we expand Indigenous rangatahi worldviews to build global citizens in a connected world, knowing that intentional activity and meaningful moments and people are really important to the way in which we lead and shape our lives. So how can we expand Indigenous rangatahi worldviews to build global citizens in a connected world? Well, what we do know is that Indigenous exchange could be is a big component to that. And scratching the surface a little is that it's through Indigenous exchange, something that for us is not a new concept. And for some time, Indigenous communities around the world have been connecting, collaborating, sharing, learning, and trading. And Aotearoa, New Zealand and Canada is no different. Māori and Canadian Indigenous peoples have long been connected by a shared association with the Pacific Ocean, a sense of solidarity and shared experience as Indigenous people. And people-to-people exchange and trade between the South Pacific and the Americas has been celebrated since the early history. For example, the presence of the kumara in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with its origins from Peru, is evidence of this. And so whilst we know Indigenous exchange is not a new concept, we do know that there are a few well-supported Indigenous to Indigenous exchanges that have a focus on rangatahi.
And so we'd like to talk about the importance of Indigenous exchanges. And that ranges on a very broad spectrum, but in Indigenous cultures, not just in Canada or New Zealand, but around the world, community, relationships, culture and ceremony, the land, those are things that are very important to Indigenous culture. And so the feeling of finding unity with other Indigenous peoples, finding similarities, it builds community in a way that almost allows one to feel proud to explore their own culture. I went to New Zealand and loved the vibrations that I got from there. And when I came home, I actually came back and went back to school and started learning about my own culture. It was allowing me to be confident, to want to pursue something, and building on this importance of bringing Indigenous peoples together, and Indigenous youth together. Imagine what that could do for them. Imagine giving the opportunity to an Indigenous youth to go somewhere else where there are Indigenous people, where their culture is celebrated. They are a part of this indigeneity, instead of just feeling displaced, as a lot of youth do in Canadian culture. So through exchanges and through those experiences being shared, and going to New Zealand was massive. It's very far away. And so if we were able to even provide an opportunity like that for our Indigenous youth, who have maybe never even thought beyond community, if we're able to create that, we might just be able to help them develop confidence in ways that they never thought that they could. So those are many reasons, and there's many more as to why Indigenous exchanges can lead to really great things.
And so you're probably thinking, why are we focusing on rangatahi? Why are we focusing on youth? Well, they are our future. Rangatahi represent the majority of the Indigenous populations across the globe. We know that in Aotearoa, New Zealand, 50% of the Māori population is under the age of 25. In Canada, their rangatahi, their young people, also make up a large proportion of the Indigenous population. So with such young Indigenous populations, rangatahi have a role to play in building movements of change, building and participating in their desired future. We also know that opportunities that put rangatahi at the centre as active participants in designing, experimenting and adapting are critical. We know that rangatahi, for them to thrive, they need to feel happy, healthy and connected. So as we move in a more globally connected way, we need to provide these opportunities where rangatahi can navigate their indigenised pathways.
And so you'll see here our I guess, structure. Everybody's heard of the SWOT analysis, but we've decided to go with the SOAR analysis. And this is something that I thought was fun. We played on some words, and Indigenous exchanges allow youth to soar. So when we talk about these intentional activities, such as creating doorways for exchanges, we're empowering youth to be able to build on themselves, build on relationships, and also maybe even take the trip that our ancestors once took, because those are experiences that maybe we don't even know about, but we're giving them this opportunity to feel confident that they can do something that their ancestors may have once done. So opportunities that you know, could come from this. And my favorite is the ripple effect. And we all know when a droplet falls into the lake, the ripples continue to grow and grow and grow. And so that concept is what happens when you inspire youth. You plant the seed, you allow it to grow, and then what happens? That person is able to bring back to not only themselves, but their communities, their families, to impact the lives of their friends in a way that, you know, you're more likely to do something when somebody in your life has done it. And I know that from experience, and I know many of you may as well. But when we do this cross-cultural exchange, we also develop the soft skills, and then that leads back to the employment world and to what are employers looking for? They're looking for adaptability, they're looking for problem solving, they're looking for these soft skills that maybe once were not as sought after as they are these days. And so when we're able to equip young people with these types of soft skills that not only help them in the employment world, but in every other aspect of their life, we are creating possibilities, empowered youth, and the continuum will continue. And it'll just, there won't be any stopping it. And so we'll normalize all of this now, present, future, and hopefully we might be able to have an opportunity for us to come out of this for youth.
So when we think about our question, how can we expand Indigenous rangatahi worldviews to build global citizens in a connected world? We think about our desired future, our aspirations. And so what we want to see is meaningful space and opportunities for Indigenous rangatahi to be strong, confident Indigenous global citizens. We want to see rangatahi that are actively participating in the design and development of a global indigenized world. We want to see the continuation of what we don't want to see, sorry, is the continuation of systematic barriers that hinder progress and change. Our desired future state also needs to see a recognition of the role that both public and private sector play in the advancement of our rangatahi. And finally, the seamless collaboration of Indigenous rangatahi to rangatahi sharing, bridging global communities is certainly one of our many aspirations that we have in our space. And so to conclude our SOAR framework analysis as our rangatahi takeoff flight to SOAR, it's important when we think about, well, what are the results? What are our measurable, what are our measures of success when we're thinking about this particular space? And for us, if we see success, it looks like a continuous stream of strong, confident, connected Indigenous navigators, specific Indigenous to Indigenous rangatahi opportunities between Aotearoa, New Zealand and Canada that foster culture, connection and confidence, that we've got an ability to leverage off a number of existing international Indigenous opportunities that our rangatahi could partake in, and that rangatahi are visible, active participants in designing and developing their future. So when we think about our question that we've posed to you around how we can expand Indigenous rangatahi worldviews to build global citizens in a connected world, well, for us, there's only one answer. And for us, we see that it's through intentional activities that explore Indigenous to Indigenous global opportunities. So through Indigenous to Indigenous opportunities are one of those key important things. And so we know that, and so you'll know, and that it's no surprise that when we think about our recommendations, or what we're calling them as being intentional actions, that what we're wanting to see is the New Zealand and the Aotearoa New Zealand and Canadian government support an INDIGI-X cross-cultural pilot exchange between our Indigenous rangatahi, something that's to be established this year, 2022, and commence in 2023. We want to see the New Zealand and Canadian government create dedicated and ongoing space for rangatahi to participate in existing international Indigenous opportunities, that the public-private sector recognise their role in creating Indigenous change makers. Create space on your boards. Everyone has a pathway and there's always an opportunity. And finally, we know that investment is always one of the systemic barriers that halt progress and change. So New Zealand and Canadian governments make available specific funding to administer and develop, obviously, our pilot program, because we think this is an opportunity for success, but also ongoing commitment to show their intention for the future of rangatahi in our globally connected world. That concludes our presentation. However, I do urge you to read our report when it is out so that you can see how we've actually scratched the surface on this exciting space. We condense things given the time allocation that we have, but we do urge those that have an opportunity to read, have a look at what we've created in terms of our report, because there are some important things in there I think that we can all take away. And so I'd like to acknowledge the team, INDIGI-X, our friends, our colleagues, our whānau, who have created space today to listen to our kōrero that we've provided, as well as the other kōrero that have gone before us. But we want to leave something with you, a bit of a takeaway, a bit of a task for you all to do. What are you doing to create space for the future at your table, your organisation and your community? Because our rangatahi need that space to participate in the design and development of their future, because they are the ones who will be handing things over to. Kia ora tātou katoa.
Wow, group 4, that was amazing. I will open it up for questions fairly shortly, but I don't think I've ever heard a more concise and convincing argument to have Indigenous youth exchanges. And I often think at least the Canadian government seems to want to do this, but they lean a lot on the universities in Canada, which are sorely underfunded and under-resourced. And their core is not to do exchanges or facilitate exchanges. I also, and this is my view, we need to have exchanges with Indigenous youth who do not go to university. Maybe they're working in trades, maybe they want to be fishermen or women, or working in the arts or what have you, tourism. So yeah, that's just a few thoughts from me, but really well done. So yeah, I'll just I'll open it up for questions from the group if everybody's not too tired.
We also recognise too that there are a number of, I guess, bilateral opportunities between our countries, that there are a number of similarities in sectors that we share, where both public and private sector spaces could be created, as mentioned in the chat, around boards. What role are there for rangatahi to actively participate at those types of tables where we know we've got common interests?
Yes, 100% agree. And if I might offer another thought, when it comes to board positions, I almost find, there's a certain age range that companies or nonprofits look for, but the views of our youth are so important and insightful, and they often see things that we're just blind to. So having that diversity, like true diversity, is so important. So I'll hand it over to Sarah and Kyle to ask a question.
Great job. I'm just going to keep my video off for this question. But I love this idea, and I've been very lucky that I've been able to live abroad and kind of currently on what you guys are doing right now, which is an international exchange. But one question I guess I just had, if you've considered, I used to be a recruiter for the University of Calgary, and I found sometimes when students come from very small communities and they even go to like an urban area, there can be an element of culture shock. And so also moving to a brand new country, there's another layer of culture shock. And so I guess I was just wondering, how would you consider, I guess, embedding like safety and feelings of, I guess, addressing some of that massive culture shock that can happen from, first off, being in a really small community and then in a different country?
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you for that question. There's some, we've all got our own lived experience, of course, but there's also some really good research around of programs like this being undertaken, and the research actually comes from Canada around what they do to set up that space to ensure that when either traveling locally within, you guys have got a big country, that has been presented with some shock and challenges and changes. So so even from a domestic perspective, it is the lead-in time and work to ensure that when those that do, whether they're traveling domestically or abroad, have got the right tools and resources, but also people around them to ensure that they, I guess, they're not jumping into a space that's going to really make them feel uncomfortable. And even where that has happened, some of the research indicates that the resilience build for some of the rangatahi that have participated in some of those really uncomfortable spaces that they haven't found themselves in has had a positive impact on their own resilience and their ability to navigate a space where they wouldn't have gone before. Some of them have said that they now feel comfortable jumping on a plane by themselves and going somewhere, so I think there's a role to play for both sides.
Thank you, that's a great answer.
If I can add to that, I think, and the initial thought was, so the indigenous to indigenous factor, because there are so many similarities, I guess the way it was sort of envisioned was, instead of just sending a youth to a different country to, figure it out on their own, if we're able to sort of pad the experience and in the sense of, there are indigenous people in different countries. The main language, to get there is similar to Canada. There are indigenous languages, but English is predominant, so that's a benefit. But also, I guess, introducing the cultural aspect. So when indigenous people are around other indigenous people, there's a sort of synergy that happens where it's like, I'm where you are, and we are connected through something that is not direct, but indirect through a broader sense. And I think if we were able to present it in a way where, you are going to a different indigenous community, perhaps that might make things feel a little bit more safe for the youth, for the families, and for the community, because they're not just going somewhere unknown. They're going somewhere to be, let's say, embraced by another indigenous culture, to then be able to, I guess, go like this and make relationships like that based on something that's already fundamental within each group. So just an experience that I had was this conference where indigenous people from all over the world were there, and it just felt like you could feel the energy. You could feel that everybody was there for a purpose, and that, I guess, is the hope, to create, there's elders, there's culture in many ways. So anyway, so it's just something I'd like to add to that question.
Kyle.
Yeah, great job, everyone. I spoke about this to you, Leah, before, and how much I love this idea. I'm also the benefactor of traveling quite young, and it really shaping my worldview. And to be honest, my self-confidence, I think that was the biggest predominant component, is leaving home for the first time and traveling sort of beyond the confines of even my own community, but my nation. And I think that component there is that I would say that where that's really, really, especially in community work, youth sort of are desiring that at a younger phase. So even, like, I think there's enough statistics out there that show that typically indigenous folks are going to university even at older ages than are typically normal for non-indigenous populations. But at that too, like in the sort of 13 to sort of 16 area, looking for massive opportunities to increase their confidence and stuff. And what I mentioned to you that one time was the W牟EG Mi'kmaq Business Development, they run an initiative where they actually have navigated the Atlantic Ocean and go between continents to get youth confidence of having this massive thing that you've done as a teenager. Essentially, you've managed to cross the ocean to go that, to build that confidence to then face other things in life. And I think that that's something that so many of our communities would desire. In my home community, when I was a kid, we used to do like essentially like 2-week portaging trips within like sort of cultural, just cultural retreats. You'd go there, you'd have like elders from your community would chaperone you. It'd be you and a bunch of other like 12 to 15-year-olds, and you'd be on a bunch of canoes portaging around lakes of Western Quebec. Those moments and those things are absolutely fundamental to building up confidence in self and confidence in culture. The great opportunity that I feel is maybe there is, as you mentioned, not only between continents or countries or nations, but also between even some provinces. And sort of what Sarah was alluding to is that there is a challenge, there's a significant challenge when you have folks who are from rural, who even just go to an urban space for a couple of years. I mean, I experienced it the first time I sort of moved to Montreal, and things like that are huge things to go across. But the earlier you could develop the self-confidence and reassurance in self, I feel like the greater opportunity there is. But if there's any way I could be involved in this going forward, I absolutely love the idea, and I'd love to lend whatever I could to it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Carl. And what you guys will be the benefactors of if you read our report is that there is quite a bit of information around the confidence build, the soft skills that Indigenous to Indigenous and international collaboration and discussions foster. You know, you get to hear a lot about the connections and things like that, but there's less information there to show the importance that the confidence building that these types of opportunities create. So we've done a little bit around that. So and Carl's really helpfully provided his own experience. So that was one of the things that we wanted to highlight, that it's not just about this connection and exchange, but it's the thing that it does, what it does to the individual self, resilience and confidence building, so that they can then, you know, they've got these new skills that they've got to develop and move forward in a really confident way.
Amazing. I'm seeing so much in the chat, and I even though the 6-week kind of formal exchange is now finished for this group, I suspect there'll be a lot of dialogue going on in the coming weeks and months to make these things happen, right? Because this program isn't about working really hard for 6 weeks and coming up with a report and then having it go off into the ether. We really want to be able to action these things. And just a closing thought for me on this topic, there's a Canadian-New Zealand cooperation agreement. There's a number of trade agreements that Canada and New Zealand have signed up to that, in my opinion, you know, the government's still trying to work out how to make it happen. It's kind of a black box and they don't know what to put into it. So yeah, I think that if we're able to build a really robust business case, which just glancing at your presentation, you know, you've made a very significant stab at already. I have no doubt that we can make this happen. And that would just be a really wonderful thing for our youth and for ourselves as well. So thank you. So we always run over time on the final presentations, even though this time we didn't have anybody from government speak. So maybe we'll start to wrap it up. But what I'd like to do is to invite Tanya Tifanua to just say a few words. So Tanya is our New Zealand country lead. She's also a very good friend and sister to me. She was a member of our inaugural cohort. I've never met her in person, but I will at some point, and just have a lot of gratitude for her support. So welcome, Tanya. You can say a few words.
Thank you, Raylene. O tira tina tātou. Kauki aku mahara ki ngā whakatauki o tētahi o o mātou kaumātua no te tokerau no ngā tikuri ko tika nui kapa. He kaumātua tēnā i tō tātou whare tiaki taonga te papa tongarewa i a māua ko Nicola Smith I mahi tahi ana ki aia. In closing, I just wanted to reflect, your presentations today have taken me back to the words of a really well-respected elder or kaumātua of ours from the far north in iwi called Ngā Tikuri, who worked together in a respected role, leader, with myself and Nicola Smith, who was a participant on our cohort, when we worked together at Te Papa Tongarewa, our national museum that houses many of our taonga. Nā, ko tika nui nei nāna anō I ki, he manu e noho ana ki tātahi, pa ko kau ana te nā mānawa, ka mōhio te manu, ka rere te whai. Nika nui gifted these words, and essentially they say there is a bird who waits on the mangroves. When the tide turns and the tide recedes, the bird knows. When the mangroves pop, the bird knows that the tide is receding. And to many of us, the recession of the tide, te hoki te tai ki tai, may be perceived as our cups being half empty. And certainly as Māori, very recently, our world feels so much emptier with the significant losses of the likes of Sir Wera, Tawera, Tākata Moana, and te kuia mōrehu o nai tūhoi e mahi tahi hoki ana ki a tātou te papa tongarewa, te hoki moana, te rika, hekerangi, with the significant loss of many of our greats and others who have brightly been acknowledged today. Heoi anō, mo tēnei manu, kei te hiki te pātiki, hei whāngai atu, hei kai mō te manu. However, also tied up into that proverbial whakatauki is the knowledge that for this bird who sits waiting on the mangroves, when the tide recedes, the flounder also comes up rises up out of the mudflats and presents itself as nourishment and replenishment for the bird and its families. So when the tide is receding, our cups may feel half empty, but it's also a time for replenishment and to revitalize, a time to be fruitful and to thrive again. Koira taku ki tēnā I a koutou, I roto I a koutou kōrero I tēnei wā. And that's what I see in your presentations today. Kei te whakaki a tātou kapu I o koutou whakaaro rangatira. Our cups are being filled with your knowledge and thought leadership. Ākua pū te ruha ka hao te rangatahi. And through your thought leadership, we, the living descendants, walk not bereft of, but in the footsteps of great leaders who have gone before us. Thank you to all of you today for taking us with you on your journeys. We're privileged to walk beside you in support. Ngā mātou ke te whiwhi, nā reira, tēnā koutou, koutou whawhai, a wā ki a hau nei, korua, a koutou, ko koe anō hoki Raylene, I arahi aki tēnei kaupapa mo tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Let's go then, Tanya. It's I think you wrapped up the session beautifully. So I don't think I have any more to add. Yeah, so the next steps for this wonderful, wonderful group will be to submit their work for publishing in our final report. I foresee a number of kind of subsequent meetings and workshops within the group and also within our wider alumni now, which is around 66 Indigenous people. And yeah, I think that, the next step for us is to really begin to work together as this group from Canada, New Zealand, and Fiji to spread the word about the connection and the the power that comes from working with other people that are like you on the other side of the world. So thank you everybody for attending. And now I'd like to invite Bob to help us end in a good way.
Let's see if I'm good. Okay. Oh, notes. What a special day this has been. It's been such an honor for me to sit with you and join. You all came together to talk and to share, but what you began today was something's very special. You took that step, and I just think it's so important that kiwapamon, kakio, all of you, kiwapamon, you looked ahead like our old people looked ahead in the old days. And we must take kaya sato chimwin. We must take those old time stories in our hearts, because that tells us who we are and what direction we take. An honor to have worked with John's father so long ago. He gave directions, and I learned much from him, and he was a man of the land. And that's the one issue I would say is make sure when we plan ahead, we plan for our youth, we wapamon, to look way ahead, and we bring our youth with us in that planning. That's what you're doing today. So, what's Aiman? We live in difficult times. Aiman, difficult. But you've something brightly today. Raylene started with the abalone shell and guiding the groups of land by the beautiful Pacific Ocean water that I've been honored to dip my paddle in. And so I share that with you. It is special. And that abalone shell that we often use, both cultures, both pieces of land that we use, we just really come together in a good way. And it holds us together. So please remember that for our youth, and that looking ahead, as our elders have done and brought you to this point, we are the ones that you group, but it's been an honor to just sit with you and listen. So the creator of us all, our kind God, creator of the lands and the seas and the air and the water, it's such an honor to be special guests on this land. That word in English, kanata a ski, in Cree, kanata a ski, a clean place of land. And each of us have that. So we bring that forward to our good minds, the clean place of land. We put our hands and our hearts to work. And today you've begun that journey. You've walked forward, you've walked together. Kayas, you came as individuals, but now you've come together as family. And it's a beautiful thing to observe. It's my honor to observe it. So just to send you off with that good way of thinking, that the old stories, the old things, bring our young people along. I'm so impressed with the language retention of most people and many people, but I often worry about so many of our Indigenous youth trying to get white degrees, letters after their name. Do they spend the same amount of time learning the language of their people? Or Stony, or any of the other languages. Put as much time as you do in academia, and put it into the way you live and the way you listen from what's been passed to you. You've been given gifts. So it's just such an honor. So I'd really like to send us off with in thoughts and no going on. Samanto. Mina Samanto Agus. Nana skumta notes. the creator of us all, of the air and the sea and the land, for the two-legged and the four-legged. We give you our deepest thanks. Minatatamihin, akakio, kipikswata. I give another special deep thanks for those that have come together, all of us that have come together, and those of us who are honored to sit with you and to hear. Kiwapmun, continue to look ahead and plan. Kakio, together, it's a mighty force. Each and every one, a Bimokte, a Mios and a Meskino, please walk that good road and with your heads high. Narana skumten. Exanma mina kawapamten. My friends, we will meet again. Exanma, that's all I have to say to you. Thank you, Raylene. Triana, I appreciate each and every one of you here. Of course, Patricia has told me she can come ride horses in the mountains, but I haven't seen her here yet. We hope to see each other in person. We hope to see each other in person someday.
And Bob, always a blessing to have you join us. Is Aotearoa still on the call? I don't know if his internet has failed him. I can't see him. I might revert to Tanya to see who can help us close with Karakia.
Hi, thank you. Again, Raylene, ko te katoa. I may choose a karakia, which links to the beautiful metaphor that Bob has been sharing with us throughout the whole course of our program and time together, the metaphor of the ocean. So the other thing about this karakia is that it's not tied to any particular religious faith, which is nice. It can apply to us all, and similar to Bob's sentiment, connect us all through the metaphor of the ocean to come together, to close in calm and unity. Nā reira me noi tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina kiuta, kia mātaratara ki tai. Kia hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, si hei mauri ora kia tātou katoa. Let the westerly winds ease and be at rest. Let the southerly winds ease and be at rest. Let calm wash across the ocean toward the land. Let calm wash across the ocean out to sea. Let a new day dawn, fresh morning frost, a light dew, the crisp morning air. Let there be life. Mauri ora kia koutou katoa, and best wishes to us all.
Nanas kumten, Tanya. And that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and congrats, you made it to the end. I'll stay on after the meeting ends to debrief or what have you, but otherwise, go off and be well. Enjoy your weekend if you're in New Zealand. Enjoy the end of the week if you're in Canada, and we'll be in touch. Take care.